Previously on RWBY.
No!
Weiss! Don't leave me! No!
And now, Chapter 12. Well, everybody, I hope you all are done recovering and recuperating after that massive, and I mean massive cliffhanger that we had for Chapter 11 concerning Weiss's character. I know we had a long week to wait, to wonder what was going to transpire and what was going to get revealed in Chapter 12, but that week-long wait is now over. Chapter 12 is now here, and I can definitely say that we got more reveals, more surprises, and more revelations that I think either we expected or did not expect. And so far, the battle for Haven Academy is turning out to be a very high point for Volume 5, and I am really curious to see where the volume will end up by the ending of Volume 5, and just to see where this is going to be pushing us moving forward for future volumes to come. So I am super excited to dive into this week's latest chapter in review and discussion. But before we even dive into my review, I just want to give this little heads up, guys. I will be talking about spoilers. I will be going in depth about all of the events and reveals and surprises that went down in Chapter 12. So if you guys have not seen the episode yet, go and watch it any way you can. And I know people watch the episode at different dates and times, whether on YouTube, being a Roosterteeth First member, or having a free account on their website. You either watch it Saturday it comes out, the next Tuesday, or the next Saturday. So whenever you guys are able to watch it, go watch the episode first, then come back, so that way we can just talk about it in depth with all of the reveals and surprises. And let's just talk about spoilers right now for this episode. And boy, Chapter 12 being entitled Vault of the Spring Maiden, this is a very heavy Spring Maiden chapter. And the big reveal and the big cliffhanger that we have for Chapter 12 is in fact that Raven, not Vernal, Raven is in fact the Spring Maiden, and this surprised me a lot because this was something I was not expecting to get revealed and having like this big twist happen with the Spring Maiden. And I don't know if anyone else expected it, but I know I did not. And I even went back to past episodes, past chapters for Volume 5 with Chapters 4 and 9, whenever Vernal was displaying her maiden powers. And if you do go back and look at those chapters, Raven is always present when Vernal is displaying maiden powers. So I really like this because this kind of has the same feel for me as in Star Wars back in the prequels when Padme Amidala would have one of her maidens kind of be her decoy. Raven was basically doing the same thing. Vernal was Raven's decoy. But what's very interesting about Raven's character actually has to deal with her wearing her mask. With Raven wearing this mask, she's able to conceal her true maiden identity because whenever she has the mask on and she activates her maiden eyes, no one can tell who is in fact using the Spring Maiden powers. That's why whenever we see Vernal standing next to Raven, Raven is wearing the mask. She's the one displaying the true maiden powers, while Vernal is just basically taking on the name of the Spring Maiden, just basically being a decoy for Raven, so that way she's able to hide her true identity, which I think is very, very cool. And I was not expecting to get that as like the big cliffhanger for Chapter 12. But even besides that big reveal of Raven being the Spring Maiden, there are other interesting things to talk about and some surprises that pop up in this latest chapter. One being Jaune's semblance kind of being revealed in this week's latest chapter. We don't have a definitive answer on what it most likely is, but it has something to do either with healing or stabilizing Weiss within her current condition. And then on the other side of this chapter, we finally get some time to dive just a little bit deeper into Hazel's character, which I am really glad we are finally getting to do because out of all of the villains we've seen so far within RWBY, his character is the most underdeveloped because we haven't really seen that much coming from him. He usually just stands there, acts as the muscle, and he just broods and acts intimidating. Other than that, he doesn't speak very much, and we don't really know too much about his backstory, why he ended up joining Salem, but this chapter we finally get to dive into it, and also his grudge that he holds over Ozpin. So there's going to be a lot to talk about. I'll start with Hazel's section, and then I'll dive just a little bit more into Jaune's semblance reveal, everything going on within that section, talk about RWBY for a little bit, and then we'll work our way back around to the Spring Maiden stuff with Vernal and Raven going up against Cinder. So this chapter starts off with, besides everything going on with Weiss and Jaune running over to her aid, we actually get to see Hazel cut loose just a little bit in the beginning of this chapter, and finally get to see some emotion coming from his character, because once Leo tells Hazel that that little boy standing next to RWBY is in fact Ozpin, we finally get to see Hazel kind of lose it for a little bit. He's just overcome with anger because he has this grudge against Ozpin, and we get to witness for the very first time him activating either his semblance or his weapon, which turns out to be dust. He uses yellow dust and he just slams it into his arms, and he just hulks out. Like, he turned into the Incredible Hulk within this episode. Just starts screaming at Oscar slash Ozpin, basically saying, you're going to die, you're going to pay for what you did, you are the incarnation of evil. And I always find it very fascinating when a villain in a series looks at one of our main characters who we see in our eyes to be the hero, to be the good guy. This person looks at them and calls them the villain, calls them evil, because then I start to think, what is the backstory between Hazel and Ozpin? What transpired between these two that led Hazel to hold this grudge over Ozpin, to where he has so much anger and aggression, to where he just wants to kill Ozpin over and over and over again? And as we come to learn in this section of the chapter, Hazel had a younger sister who attended Beacon Academy to become a huntress. However, the younger sister ended up dying on a training mission under the guidance and tutelage of Ozpin. So this right here really does explain, I think, very, very well why Hazel has all this aggression and this grudge towards Ozpin. However, for me, I feel like I need just a little bit more to justify why Hazel is a part of Salem, because if it just comes down to this, I can't agree with it 100%, because there's a line that Oscar says to Hazel that I agree with 100%. It's where Oscar says, did your sister make the choice to become a huntress? And this actually causes Hazel to hesitate a little bit, because Oscar's saying if she made that choice, that means that she put other people in front of herself. And then he says, I am willing to do the same. And then we have some nice fight choreography between Hazel and Oscar slash Ozpin, because eventually Ozpin takes over. We see some classic moves coming from Ozpin, but I think I need just a little bit more to justify what Hazel is doing. Plus, I would love to learn just a little bit more about Hazel's power set and how his powers actually work. How is he able to infuse dust crystals into his arms? What is that Hulk mode that he ended up entering? Is that his semblance? Can other people infuse dust crystals into their bodies to give them power-ups? I have a lot of questions when it comes to Hazel's powers, but I think we'll learn more about that as the series goes on. So that right there is basically everything I wanted to talk about with Hazel, Oscar, and Ozpin. But the next section and the next reveal that I want to talk about has to deal with Jaune's semblance. We finally get some more hints of the reveal of what his semblance might be. And I know this has been a question of debate for many, many years since Volume 1 of RWBY. What is Jaune's semblance? Many people have speculated maybe it increases his attack, maybe it adds on defense, maybe he's like a shield, maybe he can heal people. This has been the topic of debate for many, many years. And this episode finally gives us more clues as to what it might be. We don't have 100% confirmation of what Jaune's semblance is, but it has something to do either with healing or stabilizing the body, because what we're able to witness is Jaune basically putting this white aura over Weiss and basically bringing her kind of back from the brink of death. We don't know if he's in fact healing her, but he's able to stabilize her body into this normal state where she's able to actually basically be in a coma. As Ren was stating, he's stabilizing her body. We don't really know too much on what's going on, but I think he's just keeping her in a stable condition. Whether or not it's healing, that still remains to be seen. But I am really glad that we are finally coming to learn just a little bit more and getting more reveals about Jaune's semblance. And hopefully we get a 100% confirmation very, very soon, hopefully by the ending of Volume 5. So before I dive back into talking about the Spring Maiden reveal, I just want to give a quick shout out to RWBY's character in this latest chapter, because there's been discussion over many of the volumes whether or not RWBY has experienced and developed as a character. But as we've kind of seen in brief glimpses here and there throughout the volumes, and in this week's latest chapter, RWBY has definitely shown some character development, because she remained calm, cool and collected, assessed the entire situation, and got everyone to do what they needed to do. She ran over to Weiss, looking at the situation, didn't know what to do, looked back at Hazel fighting against Ozpin and Crow, watched Crow take a really big hit, and then looked over to Yang fighting up against Mercury and Emerald. She did not panic. She remained calm and basically got everybody to do what they needed to do. The only odd thing I would say that I thought was really weird was that when RWBY removed Jaune's hands from Weiss and said, continue doing what you're doing. And I'm like, wait, if you want him to continue doing what he's doing, wouldn't you leave his hands there? That was the only weird thing I saw in this episode. But besides that, she told Jaune what he needed to do, told Ren and Nora to guard and protect Weiss and to go fight against Hazel, and then she went over to protect Yang. And we have that classic pose coming from RWBY. And then when Yang is looking over at RWBY, basically saying, thanks sis, are you okay? And she's like, no, I'm angry. That was a nice line, hearing that coming from RWBY. That right there, I'm really looking forward to seeing our two sister team of RWBY and Yang going up against Mercury and Emerald. That was a match I have been looking forward to for quite some time. But now it's time to dive into the last section of this chapter, which deals with the reveal of the true identity of the Spring Maiden. But also we get a few surprises coming from Cinder as she double crosses Raven and Vernal. But before I even dive into any of that, can I just say that the overall environment of the Spring Maiden vault was very, very cool. I like how it was animated, how we see this large golden glowing door, the way that the ground lit up when it realized the Spring Maiden was present. And we see this giant tree with golden leaves falling down and disintegrating before they hit the ground. This overall vault had a really nice aesthetic, and I really did enjoy what Roosterteeth and the crew behind RWBY did for this overall environment. But I think many of us throughout this entire section felt the tension because we knew one of these groups was going to betray the other. We see Vernal approaching the golden door to touch it with her hands, to activate it with the Spring Maiden powers. Raven looks like she's about to double cross Cinder, but then Cinder gets the upper hand, freezes Raven, and then reveals under her long sleeve that she's had this grim arm the entire time and uses that to extend and stab Vernal before she touches the door. And at first, I was shocked by the grim arm reveal, but after looking at it and just like sitting on it, it makes a lot of sense because last chapter, when RWBY activated her silver eyes, we see Cinder falling to the ground and grabbing that same arm in pain. And we know that the Grimm are fearful of the Silver Eye Warrior. So that makes complete sense on why that arm has been concealed this entire time. It's because Salem did some experimentation on Cinder to save her life and ended up basically giving her a Grimm arm. That right there was a really cool reveal, and the way that she just extended it and killed Vernal. It's still up in the air though whether or not Vernal was killed by the ending of this chapter, but she is basically killing Vernal to gain the power of the Spring Maiden, which goes to reveal that Cinder is just after the power. She wants all four Maiden powers to herself, and I would not be surprised if her main goal was to eventually double-cross Salem. I could see that coming from Cinder, but once it is revealed that Vernal does not have the Spring Maiden powers, and we see Raven just basically explode out of the ice, and we see the Maiden eyes activate on her, where she just yells out, "I am the Spring Maiden," that shocked me. I was not expecting that at all because this whole time I thought Vernal was the Spring Maiden. I think many of us did, but going back and going into chapters 4 and 9 of volume 5, they kind of subtly hinted that Vernal and Raven were just always together when the Maiden powers were activated. So going back to those chapters, if you guys do the same, you guys will start to see like this maybe subtle clues that Roosterteeth and the crew behind RWBY were laying the groundwork for this big reveal. So that right there is the ending to chapter 12 for volume 5 of RWBY. This chapter definitely raises a lot of questions when it concerns to Jaune's semblance, but also with Raven being revealed as the Spring Maiden, because I have a lot of questions with that section as a whole. How long has Raven been the Spring Maiden? And how is it that like Crow, Ozpin, and Leo did not know that Raven was the Spring Maiden? Did she obtain that power after the original Spring Maiden ran away? Did she end up dying in the arms of Raven and that's how she ended up attaining the power? How does Vernal factor into all this? Why was she being the decoy for Raven? There's a lot of questions going on right here. I really hope that we kind of dive into it and get a little bit more answers as to how Raven ended up obtaining the power of the Spring Maiden. I know many of you guys have questions as well. You guys can definitely leave that down in the comments. I look forward to hearing all of your theories, speculations, and just an overall discussion on this latest chapter of RWBY. And the quick thing to note, only 2 chapters left for Volume 5. We have still yet to see Blake and the Fauna show up to confront the White Fang, so I am expecting that for Chapter 13, but Chapter 14 is going to be like an extra long episode. I can already feel it. It's probably going to be like a 30-minute long chapter, which I'm really looking forward to, and I'm just really curious to see how this volume is going to tie up with the final chapter and where it's going to show us and basically hint at where Volume 6 of RWBY is going to go. So leave your thoughts, theories, and speculations down in the comments below, guys. And before I sign off, I just want to say thank you guys for my Chapter 11 review. I was not expecting that video to blow up as it did. I just love getting to talk about RWBY, and the fact that so many of you guys left comments on that video and we got to talk and discuss about the semblances, just the overall world and what went down in Chapter 11 of RWBY was so much fun. Just thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it, and I just look forward to talking with you guys down in the comments of this video as well. So I love you all so much, and I'm really looking forward next week when we have Chapter 13 of RWBY Volume 5 come out. But until then, I'll talk with you guys later. See you later, guys.